Professor Achal Srivastav. I think Sir is does not need a formal introduction, but still, I think Dr. Snigdha will be introducing Achal Sir.
Good evening, all the respected professors and delegates and participants. It's my privilege to introduce Professor Achal Kumar Srivastav, sir, Professor in Department of Neurology, AIIMS, New Delhi. Sir is a faculty in AIIMS since 2001 and professor since 2013. Sir has more than 25 paper awards and more than 220 research articles, chapters, and index abstracts. Professor Achal Kumar Srivastav has a special interest area of interest are being movement disorders, ataxia, genetics, clinical neurophysiology, and intractable epilepsy. With this long list of achievements, I would like to invite Professor Achal Kumar Srivastav sir for his lecture on treatable ataxias. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are not audible, sir.
Yes,
sir, you are audible.
Okay. So thank you, Snigdha, and thanks everyone for attending this session. And last 2 days have been very good. I have been given a specific job of speaking on ataxias. So as you can understand, the topic is treatable ataxias. Nobody gives a topic of non-treatable or untreatable ataxias. So you can understand there are not many where you can actually do something. So that's why we are here discussing treatable ataxias. So if you talk of ataxias actually literally means absence of order. So, but this is a specific word which is not used everywhere. We understand is as in terms of something related to cerebellum, where we have gait ataxia or incoordination of limbs or something like that. So it denotes a clinical syndrome where there is incoordination specifically caused by lesions of cerebellum and its efferent or efferent connections, which may include spinocerebellar, pontocerebellar tracts. So if we talk of assessment of these ataxias, and from where only we will come to know whether it is treatable or non-treatable and how should we approach and what should we do. The initial assessment of these disorders where we have ataxia is complex because of an extensive list of potential diagnostic possibilities. So if you read a book, you will find so many things where you can you need to think of as a diagnosis. There are several points which you must consider into history, and that's how you will reach to a diagnosis: age at onset, mode of onset, precipitating factors, rate of progression, symptoms of raised ICP, presence of systemic symptoms, drug history, and toxin exposure, family history, not excluding the family history. So these things will lead to a diagnosis. And the diagnosis must include an in-depth assessment for potential acquired causes. And you should have a hierarchical selection of laboratory testing. And the focus should be, and not only for this particular disease, rather for every discipline in medical science, you must look for a condition which is amenable to treatment. And when you have done that, you have taken the history in detail, examination done in detail, done an in-depth assessment, then you must look for a cause and do a detailed screening for acquired causes. And when you have not found an acquired cause, then you should look for a hereditary or genetic etiology. So this is what is usually followed. I will also show what we do. And this is we have found a patient with progressive ataxia. You look for family history, it is negative or positive. Then you look for various causes. So if you are finding that patient is having an autosomal recessive history, or there is uncertain inheritance, then you should look for various causes, which should be like ARCAs, various autosomal recessive ataxias, X-linked ataxias, mitochondrial inherited disorders, and then test accordingly for those. If it is negative, then you must do some hard testing or next genome sequencing like that. And if the family history is positive and it is like autosomal dominant inheritance, then you must look for those common causes. Common causes means particularly found in those areas or countries. Like if you talk of northern part of India, you will find that type 2 is prominently found, then type 12, then type 1. But if you talk of southern part of India, you will find that commonly you will find type 1 followed by type 2, type 12 not that commonly seen. So accordingly, area wise, or if you are looking from different countries, then country wise you have a panel, common ones, and then you look for other things in next panel, like that. If the family history is negative, then again, depending on age, if it is less than 25, more than 25, you can think of those things. Again, you go into the various autosomal recessive and dominant disorders and look for cause. But this was only when you are looking into history point of view and look for cause. But this was only when you. There is some echo. Looks like. Okay. So when there is when you are looking for hereditary ataxias, there is insidious onset. The symptoms are mostly symmetrical, I will say, and the disorder is gradually progressive. You have to consider age at onset, as seen in the previous slide, less than 25, more than 25. You can decide about causes. Then late onset ataxias above 25. Then you have some usual causes, and this is the group where you will have some causes which may not be genetics. So you look for family history, direct questioning of patients and from relatives, and usually what happens, once the relatives have said that there is no family history, immediately I also used to do the same thing. No family history, all right. But this is not the question where everything finishes. You must ask in detail. Also take history from relatives. Ask again. You will find that yes, there was somebody who was affected. Moreover, when you draw a family chart, then also you will find, you ask one by one, was he affected? Was he affected? Was she affected? Then you will find, yes, she had something. Okay, so you should look for that history of consanguinity. And then you must understand that if there is no family history, that does not mean there is no genetic disease. This is what we follow, more or less the same thing which we have seen earlier in the previous slide. But this also shows you the pattern. Like autosomal dominant, we look for 1, 2, 3, 7, 12. Right. Okay. So this is something very important when it is not hereditary ataxia. So there you will find some treatable causes. Mostly you will find some treatable causes when there is no hereditary ataxia suspected. And what are those points where we should think of non-hereditary causes? Acute history, fast progression, and when there is severe asymmetry lasting for a long time. Then absence of family history, again it is plus minus. Severe asymmetry, again I would like to point out there are various disorders which are asymmetrical for many years. And if you talk of degenerative disease, the foremost example is Parkinson's disease. Here you will find that it's a degenerative disease, but asymmetry lasts, but rather it's a diagnostic point that there should be asymmetry. Similarly, for type 12 ataxia, I have personally seen that the tremor is on one side it is more for several years, for 20 years, 25 years, tremor is more on one side, left side, or sometimes in some patients right side. So this is not a very big point, but if there is severe asymmetry, I'm talking about minor difference, but when there is severe asymmetry, you must look for some non-hereditary causes. So coming back to acquired causes, non-hereditary, that means non-hereditary, there are several things which you may group into, like ataxia due to toxins, immune-mediated ataxias, ataxia due to vitamin deficiencies, and there are several rare causes. Various sporadic causes, most of them you will find that there is some treatment where you can help them. Drug toxicity, foremost, where you can easily help, just reduce the drugs. Hypothyroidism, supplement. B12, again you can supplement. Celiac sprue, you can add something in the food. Malabsorption syndromes, Lyme's disease, and paraneoplastic. These are various etiologies where you can actually do something. If you talk of hypothyroidism, usually there are other associated features which will make you suspect. a possibility of hypothyroidism giving rise to ataxia, cold intolerance, weight gain. These are usual features which everyone reads while doing MD medicine. What are the features of hypothyroidism? Not very difficult to put forward a possibility of hypothyroidism in the case of ataxia, but you must test various toxic possibilities, various anti-epileptic drugs, alcohol, so many things. It is easy to treat. But here I would like to point out, specifically in AEDs, that when you are giving anti-epileptic drug and you have reduced it, you thought that this particular anti-epileptic is responsive, you reduced it. You must be thinking that the patient will improve totally. He may not improve. Rather, some of the patients you will find that they are deteriorating. So in those scenarios, you must check for possibility of some degenerative disease. You must check it. On several occasions, we have found that patients who were on anti-epileptic, earlier it was thought that because of high anti-epileptic drug level, they are having ataxia. Even after removing the anti-epileptic, changing it to other anti-epileptic, they did not improve, rather kept on worsening. Later turned out to be some hereditary disease, specifically type 2. So it is not the scenario always not like type 2, always it will not come out, but on those occasions which I have personally seen, most of them turned out to be type 2. B12 deficiency. Again, there are several features by which you recognize B12 deficiency. Celiac screw. Again, it is something which is gradually, we should show you a gradually progressive type of pattern. You may have pure cerebellar syndrome. There is gluten sensitivity, which is recognized by various tests you can recognize, and you may help the patient by giving them gluten-free diet. Various paraneoplastic antibodies which may give rise to pancerebellar syndromes, NTO, then NTHU, NTRE, NTCV2, so several things, and there is a big list. And also it is tested like a panel. When you are suspecting a paraneoplastic etiology, you ask for a panel, and then you may find one if your suspicion is right. But these were some causes where genetics was not expected. Here, it's a list where genetics is there. They are genetic causes, but you may help some of the patients to some extent, like Wilson's disease, ataxia with vitamin E deficiency, Niemann-Pick type C, cerebrotendinous xanthomatosis, A-beta lipoproteinemia, Refsum's disease. There you can do something. Wilson's disease, you all know, I need not go into the greater detail how to treat Wilson's disease. Everyone knows sitting here. Ataxia with vitamin E deficiency. Here you must think and try to understand that it often mimics Friedreich's ataxia. The age of onset is usually between 2 to 50 years, mostly around 20 years. It's a recessive type of inheritance pattern. And then patients may have pure cerebral ataxia, sometimes pure sensory neuropathy, retinitis pigmentosa. Patient may have dystonic tremor. Vitamin A level, E level, you can see here, less than 1 milligram per liter. Cardiomyopathy is less common in ataxia with vitamin E deficiency, but in our country, our series of Friedreich's ataxia shows that cardiac involvement is not that common. I have a series of some 160 cases of Friedreich's ataxia. We found that it is not 2/3. The literature says that some 2/3, 70% patients will have cardiac involvement. It is not the case with us. Only 30% cases showed cardiac involvement. We have done echo of all those patients and did not found cardiomyopathy. So these patients have slower course, mild neuropathy is there in comparison to Friedreich's cases. And you can treat them by giving vitamin E. Recovery is slow, and it is said that if you diagnose them early, specifically before 15 years, they show a good improvement. Cerebrotendinous xanthomatosis, again, it shows an autosomal recessive type of inheritance. Onset is in the childhood. There are some specific features by which you may suspect, like intellectual deficiency, sometimes seizures, spastic ataxia, then peripheral neuropathy. Various movement disorders may occur, and the cataract, diarrhea, tendon xanthomas, these things are there by which you can easily recognize. The two patients' families which I have seen, there were tendon xanthomas in them. You can test for cholesterol levels, you will find that it is elevated. This is one which we reported earlier, somewhere in 1999. We have found this case, reported later, published in Neurology India 2003. You treat them with chenodeoxycholic acid, and they show improvement. Again, early treatment is better than diagnosing them late, and then you may not show any improvement in those patients. Niemann-Pick type C, and this is again a genetic disease. There are two types of mutations, and there is accumulation of glucosamine in the brain. So what happens? The patients develops ataxia. There is vertical supranuclear ophthalmoplegia, and that is why it matches with PSP, and then dysarthria, dysphagia, cognitive impairment, the various features which may splenomegaly may be found, psychiatric disorders may be found. So various things are there, and this is treated by miglustat, which is not available in our country. I have personally seen only one case and not tried to treat with this because it is not available. A-beta lipoproteinemia, autosomal recessive type of pattern. Again, there is a gene which is found to be responsible for this particular disease. There is absence of plasma apolipoprotein B. And again, here the age of onset, you must see that less than 20 years. There is vitamin E deficiency, hyporeflexia, posterior column dysfunction, muscle weakness, and spinocerebellar ataxia, which you can examine and find. There is retinitis pigmentosa. So many things are there by which you can suspect and then prove it and then treat accordingly. You can treat it by giving vitamin E, and you can also do dietary modification, which consists of low-fat diet and vitamin replacement of fat-soluble vitamins, specifically type E, vitamin E. Repsom's disease, it's an autosomal recessive disorder again, and it's a disorder of fatty acid metabolism. And this presents with a tetrad of diagnostic symptoms: retinitis pigmentosa, cerebral ataxia, polyneuropathy, and high CSF protein without pleocytosis. There is sensory neural deafness, anosmia, skeletal abnormalities, ichthyosis, renal paralysis. These are the symptoms by which you recognize them. And the onset again is 20 to 30 year age. Earliest manifestation sometimes may be night blindness. Fatinic acid is something which is found primarily in dairy products, meat, fish, and it accumulates and gives rise to the disease symptoms. So, fatinic acid concentration is tested in plasma serum and found to be raised. So that is how you confirm the diagnosis apart from the clinical features. So what you do, we try to reduce these products in the food, and also some specific precaution in this particular disease: avoid stressful conditions such as rapid weight loss or illness, because it results in mobilization of fatty acid from fat stores, and again this will give rise to sudden worsening. GLUT1 deficiency, this is another disease where you can do something, and it's because of de novo mutation SLC2A1, and phenotype is quite variable, ranges from cognitive deficits to motor disorders to seizures to cerebral syndrome. That is how you may have just some mild motor symptoms to severe neurological deficit. So it's a very heterogeneous, variable symptom disease. So ataxic gait is seen in 70% of patients. 35% are purely ataxic. That is where you will find it difficult to suspect GLUT1 deficiency. Hallmark of this disorder is a low CSF glucose ratio of 0.4. So by doing CSF examination, your suspicion will be further high. So ketogenic diet is effective in treating ataxia with reduction in movement disorders by 40 to 70%. Again, you see here that is there is no 100% improvement, but 40 to 70% is good enough to try to treat these patients with GLUT1 deficiency. Episodic ataxia type 2 is an autosomal dominant disorder which is caused by mutation of CACN1 gene, and residents must be remembering there are several other diseases which are associated with this particular gene. In this disorder, particular type 2, what happens is there is insidious onset of episodes of ataxia. In intellectual period, you will find nystagmus, and these episodes are commonly triggered by emotional or physical stress. So during attack, patient may complain of nausea, vertigo, dysarthria, truncal ataxia, and some around 50% of patients may have headache. So long-standing patients, for several, if the symptoms are there for many years, those patients on doing imaging may show anterior cerebellovermial atrophy. As I said earlier, there are two other diseases which are associated with this: familial hemiplegic migraine 1. So this is again, I should say, it is on the same allele. So that's how the residents remember, and so often the question is also asked in the examination. Approximately 2/3 of these patients respond to treatment, and as you know, acetazolamide is given 250 to 1000 milligram per day doses, and you can also give potassium channel blockers, 4-aminopyridine, 5 milligram 3 times a day. So we come to the next disease, glutamic acid decarboxylase ataxia. It accounts for 28 to 63% of symptoms where you may have just cerebral ataxia. So again, this must be suspected. There are subacute presentations which are more likely to respond to immunotherapy, and if you do immunotherapy at right time, you may achieve a good response or good functional status. IVIG and corticosteroids have been used successfully in these patients. Then coenzyme Q10 deficiency. This has been found to be associated with 5 major symptoms. 5 major, I should say, groups, phenotype groups. One is encephalomyopathy, then severe infantile multisystemic diseases, then nephropathy, isolated myopathy, and cerebral ataxia. So cerebral ataxia is the one where we are looking for today. So this can give rise to isolated syndrome of cerebral ataxia as well. Most common phenotype is a slowly progressive cerebral syndrome. So patients present with isolated gait ataxia, but over a period of time, they will develop other features like dysarthria, limb ataxia, and you may find on examination brisk reflexes. There are some minor eye abnormalities like slow saccade, smooth, the pursuits may be affected. So diagnosis of this requires measurement of CoQ10 in skeletal muscles. The response to the treatment is very variable, ranging from good clinical outcome to negligible benefit. So if you are sure about diagnosis and they are not improving, that doesn't mean your diagnosis is wrong. As you know, this is available, the CoQ10 is available in the market, you can try. Friedreich's ataxia, again, I will not go into the Friedreich's ataxia as said, but there are several drugs which have been tried over years, but I will say that most of them have failed. Idebenone showed good promise, but again, in a bigger trial, it failed. Did not show any significant improvement, specifically in neurological functions. They found that there was some improvement in the hypertrophy of the cardiac muscle. So that also, in a bigger trial, did not show much improvement. But you can try, in absence of any other thing, you can try. So I will like to conclude over here. Recognizing potentially treatable causes of cerebral ataxia is critical, not only to implement targeted treatments, but also to institute management as early as possible to hopefully halt neurological deterioration. So you must have a positive frame of mind. Don't think that cerebral disease, no improvement, forget it. Brain MRI is necessary to assess for cerebellar or cerebral atrophy and to look for unique radiological signs pointing to a specific disease. Then in patients without family history and subacute symptoms, progression, testing for paraneoplastic and immune-mediated etiologies, including TPO, anti-GAD, anti-GLADin, TG2, must be considered. Testing for potentially treatable diseases, including serum vitamin E levels, cholesterol, phytonic acid, and coenzyme Q10 in skeletal muscles should be entertained where your suspicion is high. Finally, ancillary testing should be individualized, but strong consideration should be given to assessing for potentially treatable causes of cerebral ataxias. This is one review which we wrote around 1.5 years back, treating hereditary ataxia, where can we help? The interested readers may refer to this particular publication and read that. Thank you.